Hey everyone, welcome to today's live stream. Marilynn Hughes from the Outofbody Travel Foundation. I have a special guest this month on our live stream. I am very excited to welcome Curtis Shields from the Emanuel Swedenborg Foundation. And Curtis Shields is the Vice President of Programming at the Swedenborg Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to sharing the insights of Emanuel Swedenborg, an 18th century Christian mystic who was allowed to witness the afterlife firsthand. For those of you who are familiar with my books, you know that I am a big fan of Emanuel Swedenborg, and I utilize his writings throughout my books, have quotes from him throughout my writings. He's one of my favorite mystics. So he was able to witness the afterlife firsthand, as well as communicate with spirits and angels about the true nature of reality. With his epic work, Heaven and Hell, that I always talk about. He's also the main presenter, Curtis Shields, for Off the Left Eye YouTube channel, which many of you are familiar with on my channel, which offers answers to a wide range of spiritual questions, including the inner meaning of the Bible, what heaven and hell are really like, life on other planets, and how human beings can find peace, meaning, and purpose in life. So welcome, Curtis. So happy you're with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. We've kind of been talking on and off for almost a decade, so it's awesome.
Right. We are old buddies, and it's really good to see you again.
Oh, you as well. So for everyone watching, as usual, please subscribe to our channel. It keeps us searchable so people can find us on YouTube. And please join the channel if you can. It helps us to keep our content free to everyone in every nook and cranny of the world. And that is so important. We want to keep that poverty, that spiritual poverty, coming on up. We want to, we're reducing spiritual poverty worldwide. That's our mission statement. And that's one of the ways we do it, by keeping things free. So the memberships really, really help. For those of you who are already members, thank you so much. And for those of you who haven't yet looked, the little join button up top, you can look at 5 different options for membership. Take a look, see if it's something you think you can do. We'd love that. Thank you so much. So one of the things we do here on our live streams, as you know, is often take a look at an experience that I've had, and then we kind of dig deeper. And here's an experience I'm going to share that I had years ago regarding Emanuel Swedenborg in the afterlife realms. It's very short, but I thought we'd start out with it. And it was interesting because I was taken to see how souls were actually learning from Emanuel Swedenborg in the modern day, current day, still, as they're crossing over. And so this is from the Mysteries of the Redemption. So it says, my soul was returned to the heavens, to a place known as the Emanuel Swedenborg Institute, teaching the visionary knowledge of the 18th century Christian mystic. Immediately, I was directed to take a shower. I was given a special rose-scented soap and shampoo. Lathering up, the smell of the roses permeated every cell of my being with a tranquil joy. After showering, I went to the dressing room to discover what they might bid me wear. Told to put on some divine providence and divine love and wisdom, which are titles of Swedenborgian texts, the garments were arrayed in front of me. It was a beautiful garment which was to adorn my body. So they were these beautiful dresses lying on the bed in front of me. So I gently took it and lowered it over my head, and I felt such immense peace. Below the garment was a rose-scented perfume with which to adorn my body. So now I was smelling like a rose. It was obvious to me that the concepts of divine providence and divine love and wisdom were an integral part in the mysteries of the redemption. And as I wore the garment of the Lord, the knowledge of it was made energetically manifest unto me. Any thoughts, Curtis?
Oh man. Well, I I love that story, and I want to know. So there's a Emanuel Swedenborg Institute in the afterlife. What's it like? I got to get some pointers because we've got this like physical equivalent here. So they wanted you to get dressed. They gave you nice shampoo, roses. That's good correspondence. But do you have any other details about what was it like at the institute?
Well, what I remember, and what's interesting is that I found that this is often the case because, I've talked to my members a lot how there's an out-of-body travel foundation in the mystical spheres too. And, we have members who have crossed over and many of them are there or they are there intermittently as well. And I've seen this with other spiritual works. But with the Emanuel Swedenborg Institute, it was kind of like almost, it was a wooded area. It was very green. It was almost like what you would think of like a summer camp.
Yeah.
I remember how it was like deciduous trees, not like, I've lived in the West. So it wasn't more, in the Western climate out here, we have the drier climate, we have the aspen trees, the pine trees. It was this lush green deciduous trees and grasses that I remember from the Midwest when I grew up in Ohio, so more of that deciduous. And so there was a lot of beautiful lush grass and these deciduous trees and that beautiful smell, that beautiful smell of that, how the air is clean after the rain has fallen.
Yeah.
It was like that. And everybody was going through, there were all these souls, many souls were there. And it was interesting too, because there were other parts to this experience. I didn't go into the whole thing. There were other parts to this experience where other souls were going through like trials and temptations. They were being tested to see if they would fall for certain ruses or, temptations. There were other things where people and souls were being instructed in their purpose, their destiny in this life. So there were souls that were deceased and there were souls that were alive. And earlier in this experience, there was this part here. In order to discern who was present, who was alive, and who was deceased, you would place a mirror before them. And if their face showed up in the mirror, if their face showed up in the mirror, they were actually still alive on earth. If they did not show up in the mirror, they were deceased.
Yeah.
And so there was a mixture of both. So at this Emanuel Swedenborg Institute, there was teaching going on of both the souls living and the souls who had died.
I got to sign up
it
for
was like a camp. There were like camp quarters. There were little cabins, but the cabins held, it wasn't just like one person. It was 10 to 20 people, souls per quarters. There were places where people would gather in groups, community gathering. There were teachers there. There were many teachers there, like camp counselors, but they were obviously much more than that. But one thing that I pulled out, Emanuel Swedenborg's spiritual diary, that I thought was a good way to kind of talk about this smell of the roses. And I talked to people a lot about the fragrance, and I wrote a book myself called Fragrance Mysticism. Most of my readers have probably seen that. And how in the afterlife, there is this fragrance. And I found this interesting thing that Emanuel Swedenborg said. He said, this is from number 323 in his spiritual diary. And he's talking about the opposite. He's talking about the stench of evil, but
Yeah.
he talks about both in his writings. He says, it is wonderful that souls after death, when it is permitted, can clearly and sensibly perceive by smell of what nature the subject is who is dead, and who, when he has led a wicked life, emits a stench so filthy, like that emanating from a dead body, that his approach cannot be endured. And so he goes on to explain this, but we also know that when we have the smell of roses, that's the smell of the saints. But in this same thing, he goes on to say, from these things, I could conclude that by the mark set upon Cain, such an odor is understood. He thinks possibly that the mark of Cain was the spiritual stench of sin.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Wow.
Oh,
Okay. So
Emmanuel,
pun
man,
intended.
it's so cool.
There's so many things in there that are lighting me up, and I love your description of that spiritual camp. I went to a couple of camps kind of like that physically.
Yeah.
Growing up, there was like, I grew up in a Swedenborgian church, and we would have church camps where there was one called Laurel Camp, and it was in Laurel State Park in Pennsylvania. It was like this big woods, and there were these cabins, and you'd stay in them. And so maybe I have like a
Interesting.
Earth version of that. I got to sign up for a class. If people can go there when they're still alive, I want to take a course, because I need to know how they're doing things, because I want to emulate that. But that's so cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, sure. One thing I wanted to ask you that I thought would be so neat for my viewers to hear from you is, the question of how Emanuel Swedenborg came to have his experiences, because most people don't know that story.
Yeah.
And it's very cool.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that makes it really cool is that it was documented in real time as it was happening.
Yeah.
So he didn't have to think back and what was I doing? How did my awakening happen? And sort of write an account there, because he was keeping a travel journal when things really started. And you can pick this up now. It's now called Journal of Dreams, which is different than the Journal of Spiritual Experiences that you just read from. There's this earlier journal. It's a lot shorter, but
is it in print?
It's in print. Yep. If you go to Swedenborg.com, we have it there. I think it's called Emanuel Swedenborg's Journal of Dreams.
Okay.
And it is him. At first, it's a travel journal. He's talking about where he's going, but then he starts to record his dreams, and he starts to try to analyze his dreams, as in, what do they mean? For the example I love to give is he was encountering a black dog in his dreams a lot, and it was an aggressive dog. It would try to bite him, and at some point he figures out that he believes that this is a correspondence or like a direct symbol of his pride, because he was, for those who don't know, he was good at everything. He was very accomplished in multiple scientific fields. He was an inventor. He was somebody of note in the mining industry in Sweden, which was one of the most powerful industries on the planet at the time. He was in government. He was doing everything, and he was getting a big head about it. And this was one of the main things that he had to overcome during this period of spiritual awakening. So the black dog was this symbol of that. So his dreams were happening, and they were getting more and more vivid and more personal. And eventually those broke through into what experiences in what he would call a state of full wakefulness. But it wasn't just like there's a leak in the roof and things are getting in. There was an order and a process to it. It was very much, it went hand in hand. His spiritual awakening went hand in hand with his moral regeneration. So, for example, the pride that he had, him having to give that up and see himself as no better than any other person and really nothing in comparison to God. This was a huge part of his awakening. It wasn't just that the eyes of his spirit opened, but it's that his mind and heart had to be prepared to be a spiritual person so that he could go into the spiritual world with his head on straight. you know?
Well, this is so important because everything that I share in my books and talk to people about and share from all these ancient sacred texts is this purification journey and this pivotal moment. And you're sharing that Swedenborg had the same thing. He had to overcome this primary vice. And that's what we talk about. So just pointing this out to the viewers here, this is it. This is that moment that we all face. So go ahead.
No, it's a great way to put it. And you just think, if you hear spiritual, I'm going to be a spiritual person, you know that there's some kind of component in that of being a kinder person, of being a person that you'd more want to spend time with. Because if it was just, some people will say, does Swedenborg tell you how to have the same kind of experiences that he does? He doesn't really. I mean, he doesn't, even though they were extremely important to him and were what allowed him to bring all this information that's I've found so vitally useful. The most important things that we do in our lives are actually this purification process. So,
oh, amen.
Because let's say if I was Curtis and suddenly I could, have all kinds of out-of-body experiences and go and know things, but I was still as self-centered and I used all that for negativity, it's not really spiritual. It's just you've got more abilities. So
exactly.
the core of it is this regeneration, and really that you can make as much progress through this, overcoming those vices and developing a relationship with the Lord without spiritual experiences as you can with. He would describe that people, even if you can get your heart right, if you can get a good heart, then in the afterlife, that attracts wisdom to it. So he said that there's people that Swedenborg was highly educated and he ran in highly educated circles, but throughout his works, this theme appears that it's not really about how smart you are, it's about how much love you have in your heart. And that in the afterlife, even people who were simple or uneducated, who had a good heart and who followed the God as best they knew how, they would speak incredibly wisely because that love that was in them attracted that wisdom to them. So Swedenborg would certainly say you can get a lot out of spiritual experiences. They were incredibly important to him, but the movement that makes that all possible is the regeneration, and that's something that all of us can access. Because I haven't had spiritual experiences, like overt ones, but yet I feel my life totally transformed by hearing about other people's and taking that and applying it to my regular life. It's kind of like bringing that heaven that I hear about to my earthly day to day, and I start to see where that shows up. Even though I can't see the same things Swedenborg saw, I can see the same dynamics in my own thoughts and feelings and the way the world works. That's where I get my conviction that, this is really how it is.
Yeah, exactly. That is just so well said, Curtis. I love what you just did, because that's exactly what I try to tell people is the practice, the experiences of out-of-body travel are a tool. They're not the truth. Right. They're not the truth. The truth, the process of purification is the goal of the experience. And part of what you show just by what you share is that even just studying the works that other great mystics have come to, excuse me, like Emanuel Swedenborg and other great ones, is that we can learn just as much by gleaning from what they have been able to bring in to us, and that we can utilize what we need to know, and we can become what we need to be. We don't have to all have these paranormal gifts in order to progress. The progression is very natural. The progression is simple purification, the purification of our vices into virtues. It ironically goes back to the path of mystical theology, which is that.
Yeah, and it's got to be something that everybody can participate in at any time.
Absolutely.
If you think if it's God's will that everybody grow and come into the states of happiness that you could call heaven, then it's got to be the pursuit of those is something that you can do regardless of your supernatural gifts. I think that there is an ideal state Swedenborg talks about how things used to be, how they're supposed to be before self-centeredness and materialism kind of mucked up the communication between the physical and spiritual worlds. In the earliest sort of idyllic beginning of the human race that he describes, it was like open communication, that people would receive they would have dreams that were direct communication. They could speak with angels. There was kind of what your heart yearns for, just this open, like if you described, or if somebody I knew died, I could just have a vision of them pretty easily and talk to them a little bit, that was the world that we had. Things have gotten polluted to just by the rise of self-centeredness and materialism in the human race. So it's harder for us as the whole human race to have that. But even though we're trying to get back there eventually, in the meantime, you can connect to you can be, your spirit can be in heaven if you've got that same love in your heart.
Exactly. Yes.
All right, good.
Exactly correct. And it even goes back to my own near-death experience, where Jesus told me, the goal of all human existence is to go from selfishness to selflessness,
Yeah.
and each one of us can do that individually, and so that gives us a lot of empowerment, because, we don't have to figure out how to make the whole human race do it together. We just have to make it happen within our own soul, within our own heart. And,
Yeah.
that's hard enough, but that's still manageable.
That's plenty. That's plenty.
But, in the vision that I had, it spoke specifically of two books by Emanuel Swedenborg, Divine Providence and Divine Love and Wisdom. And I picked out a couple of things in those books, and I'll start with Divine Providence. And it said that, let me see if I can figure out my little, okay, here they are, my little bookmarks. It says here, and I liked this because it used one of his, well-known sayings. So it says, "It has been made known from things seen and heard."
Yeah. Classic.
I love that. He uses that a lot. That the angelic heaven appears before the Lord as one man, and each society of heaven likewise. And it is from this that each angel or spirit is a human being in complete form. It was also shown in the treatises mentioned that heaven is not heaven from anything belonging to the angels, but from their reception of divine love and wisdom from the Lord. Hence, it may be evident that the Lord rules the whole angelic heaven as one man. And since heaven is itself man, it is the very image and likeness of the Lord, and the Lord rules it as the soul rules its body. Since all mankind is ruled by the Lord, it is ruled by the Lord not through heaven, but from heaven, consequently by him, for he is heaven, as we have said. This is an arcanum of angelic wisdom. However, and therefore cannot be comprehended by man unless his spiritual mind has been opened. There's a little list here of just 7 items of the basic understanding. I'm going to summarize them, and then
Sure.
we may have to jump into a second live stream because it looks like we're running out of time.
Okay.
But then we can talk about these. So 1, it says, men as well as angels are in the Lord, and the Lord in them, according to their conjunction with him, or what is the same, according to their reception of love and wisdom from him. 2, each of them has a place allotted to him in the Lord, thus in heaven, according to the nature of the conjunction or the reception of him. What I love about this is because it really talks to a lot of what I speak of to all of you who are watching out there, about how everything is what we choose to receive from above. And Emanuel Swedenborg talks about this a lot. So 3, each in his place has a state of his own distinct from that of others, and draws his portion from what is had in common, according to his situation, function, and need, quite as each part does in the human body. For everyone is brought into his place by the Lord according to his life. 5, every human being is introduced from infancy into this divine man whose soul and life is the Lord, and within it, and not outside of it, is led and taught from his divine love according to his divine wisdom. But as a man is not deprived of freedom, he can be led and taught only in the measure of his receptiveness. It's all of the vibration and frequency of what we receive as of himself. 6, those who are receptive are conducted to their places through an infinite maze by winding paths, much as the chyle is carried through the mesentery and the lacteal vessels there to its cistern, and from this into the blood by the thoracic duct and so to its place. And 7, those who are not receptive are parted from those within the divine man as excrement and urine are removed from man. He's always very blunt. I love that too.
Yeah.
And
Body
finally,
talk.
he says there are arcana of angelic wisdom which man cannot comprehend, but these are the ones that we can try to comprehend. And so what I'd love to do is wrap this one up and come right back in and talk about that, if that's okay with you, Curtis.
Would love to.
Okay, so let's see. I am going to, so everyone, please come back. We will be right back in the second live stream, and we'll continue from right where we leave off. See you in a minute.